Hello, how you doing? Welcome to Fighting Back, our weekly webinar helping you, the business owner, fight back against the economic impact of the COVID-19 virus. Most of the clients we've worked with over the years have come to Wardell to increase their market value, and in that time, we've been able to add hundreds of millions of dollars worth of value to those companies across the globe. We did this by helping our clients' businesses become operationally independent. In other words, their business became a place they loved to go to work, but not necessarily a place they had to go to work. We turned their business into a genuine cash-producing asset. And then, in less than a week, the COVID-19 virus wiped out much of that value, making all that work we did seemingly for nothing. Or was it really? I guess it depends on how you define value. If you think of value in the short term, then yeah, sure. If you try to sell your business today, you're going to find it's probably harder to sell and it's probably worth less than it was. But if your business has been properly built, much of that value is really just lying dormant, like a hibernating bear waiting to wake up in the springtime and start searching for food again. If your business has not been properly built, then you may have a different experience, but that doesn't mean you can't do something about it now. As long as you are stable from a cash flow perspective, then my advice is to work harder than ever before on getting your business ready to wake up again and start hunting when the ice finally melts. 3 things that are important for you to do right now, and they may seem surprising or not what you expect me to say anyway, but trust me, they are the key to the door of opportunity that waits for you on the other side of this virus. First of all, you need to revisit your mission statement. These are your purpose, this is your cause, your reason for being. Like Google's making the world information available to all. This is the kind of thing that will attract your people and attract yourself to where you're going in the first place and get you through the muck that you're having to struggle through right now. Second thing, revisit your values. Your values are the rules of the road for you, things like integrity or humor, what's important to you. And finally, revisit your vision. This is your picture of the future, where you want to be in 3 years from now, what your plans are. Get inspired and think through what's happening in the world right now. Watch the news, maybe not all the bad stuff. Think, analyze, talk to your customers. It's time to rethink where you're headed as a company. If you need some help with this, hey, give us a call, give us an email. We'll help you out, no problem. Of course, these things are always important, you know that, but at a time like now, they're even more important. You and your people need something real that you can hold on to. It's very important. And if you do this properly, you'll motivate both your team and yourself to tip the odds back into your favor. With that, I'd like to introduce my guest today, my good friend Axel Christiansen. Axel is Vice President of Renaissance Mergers and Acquisitions. He's a CFA charter holder. He has over 25 years of experience in M&A and corporate finance. Prior to joining Renaissance, Axel was a founding member of Van City Capital and the managing director at BDC Capital. Axel, if you can hear me, can you hear me? Thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for the generous introduction and for having me on.
Well, absolutely. So listen, wow. The world's changed since we last spoke a lot.
Just a little bit, yes.
Yeah, and it seems to be changing every day. So I want to know what, in your world, in the M&A world that you're in right now, what's going on? Are transactions shut down? Are deals still getting done? Like, what's going on?
Well, it's gotten pretty quiet in the M&A world right now. This is the first time I've had to put on this tie in a few weeks, and that's sort of endemic of what's going on out there. M&A historically is a very cyclical industry. So when this sort of volatility rears its head, you'll see M&A volumes drop precipitously for a period of time. And I think we're certainly seeing that right now. I wouldn't say deals are stopping. Deals are being put on hold for a variety of reasons, positive and negative. For example, we've got one transaction supposed to close at the end of the month. The buyers step back because they've got fires they have to put out in their existing portfolio of companies. And they just want to have a little bit of runway to see where this is all going, feel a little more stability before they move forward on the acquisition.
Yeah.
And then we've got another one that's distribution business in the food space doing extraordinarily well, like triple volume, struggling just to keep up, bursting at the seams. Absolutely doesn't have the bandwidth to go through a diligence process right now. So that one's got to be on hold until things normalize a little bit more as well. So
are any deals getting done at all, or really, like, is anything sneaking through?
We got one that snuck through last month, but I'd say that's before most of this really started to happen. A survey came out last week of M&A advisors, and 82% of them were seeing that the volume had dropped off significantly,
Yep.
and 50% of transactions were on hold. So there's still some that are moving along, but the ones that you're going to see go to market now or that are going to successfully complete in this environment are going to be companies in defensive industries, companies that are either holding their own in this environment or even better are excelling because of some of the changes in the demand patterns. So those transactions are going ahead because you're seeing less money chasing deals right now, but there'll be a concentration on that subset of transactions. And so those deals will still move forward. Everything else has been in limbo.
So what's happening to multiples? So you said that you've got, for example, you just gave an example of a business that in the food industry that can barely keep up with what's going on. They're not looking to sell right now. But what kind of impact does that have on a business's multiple, short term, or I guess it depends on what happens over the long term. But maybe you can just expand on that a little bit. What's going on with multiples with these kind of companies?
Yeah, I get that question a lot these days. Before I jump into that, maybe just a couple of takeaways that I'm hoping entrepreneurs will take from this experience. And the first one is a saying that's in our industry that we've been spreading far and wide for a few years already, is that the market tells you when it's time to sell. We were coming from an environment where there was lots of lending available, lots of money chasing deals, a real robust economic environment, perfect environment for a seller, right? And we've been preaching that message for a while. But a lot of sellers have just taken the option to kind of sell on their own timeline, and the risk that you take in doing that is kind of what we're experiencing now. A lot of people have been set back potentially years from getting the same value they might have achieved 2 months ago, right? So hopefully that message is something that entrepreneurs will pick up through this experience. And the other is when selling, time is of the essence. When you're in a sale process, you want to get that done as quickly as possible. A company that could have closed in February, but it kind of was slow in the diligence process and now hasn't gotten done, that's going to be very costly for that business. So those are two takeaways I think this sort of volatility hopefully kind of brings to light. To your question on valuation multiples, the honest answer is I don't know, and it depends, which is not a great answer, but I'm in good company. I was on a webinar of valuation specialists, CBDs and US valuation specialists yesterday, and they were struggling to figure out how to model this and how to go about valuing companies in the current environment. So it's not an easy question to answer. In terms of best guess, I'd say over the near term, you're going to see downward pressure on values. There's going to be an uncertainty discount. Like the world is just a less safe place right now for any business. There's going to be less capital available. Banks are definitely going to be pulling back their capital availability in this environment. That will impact valuations. There are fewer buyers out there. Some are just holding tight. Others are putting out fires. And public company multiples have obviously dropped, and that's the currency that public companies use to acquire companies. So all those things over the short term are going to create lower valuations, except for, of course, those counter-cyclical defensive businesses. I think those are still going to be able to command solid valuations. And then where we go in the medium term really depends on what the recovery looks like. If it's a V-shaped recovery, guys like me will be able to largely normalize around what is a non-recurring event. If it's an L-shaped and it takes a while to grind our way out of this, that's going to have an impact on value, because value is cash flow, and if cash flow has changed materially for the longer term, it's going to impact value.
Right. So maybe my hibernating example that I talked about at the beginning, that if it's a V-shaped recovery, then easier for you is what you're saying to sort of normalize that out and look at the business from the trajectory from before to the future, and just almost as if that didn't happen. Hopefully, I mean that's the right.
Pretty much. It's like a one-time non-recurring event might have impacted the business significantly for 6 months, but it's not likely. I mean, to the extent that it's not likely to occur again in the near term. Then the business has shown that it's returned to kind of regular operating results. You can make a good case, and you're likely not to take a real hit on valuation if that's the scenario. There might be a broad-based, modest decline in valuation multiples because now there's a new risk factor that affects everybody that is on everybody's radar. But there won't be any company-specific reduction if it's a V-shaped recovery. If it's longer term, then your value was based on a track record of historic cash flows.
Right.
If those are not likely to be repeated over the next 2, 3, 4 years, your value multiple is going to drop.
Right. So all the more important for businesses that, especially, and because I would hazard to guess that coming out of this, we talk about a V shape or an L shape, but it's probably a combination depending on the business, the industry. There's going to be a variety of things that will come out of this, I imagine, right? I guess the answer is always good.
And
for sure.
Some that are excelling in this environment, right? And so return to normal is going to be a negative.
It's easy for them. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
There are unfortunately many that aren't going to make it through this experience. I mean,
I know.
People talking about an I-shaped recovery, as in straight down, and that's it. That's the more bearish perspective. But for some companies, that's going to be unfortunately the reality.
I know it's sickening, really, and it's sickening. But that's why we got to work so hard, I think, at strategic planning for companies that really, really think through where things are going. We don't know, but you can improve your odds at least. So do you think we're going to see valuations? I know the answer is I don't know, but I'm going to ask anyway. Do you think we're going to see valuations come back to their normal heights in the next few years? And I realize the answer is no,
I think in the next few years you can be comfortable about that. In the near term, I think that's not likely. I think if you are going to sell in the near term, unless you're one of those counter-cyclical businesses, you're going to take a bit of a haircut on value.
Yeah. I mean, we have some clients that are pivoting hard right now. Like they're literally taking their business from one industry and shifting it almost entirely into another industry. They figured out what their core competencies and what they're good at, and they're moving that into something completely different from what they were doing before. Be interesting to see what that does for valuations, and hopefully, because it's an entirely different industry, and what they're doing may not last for the long term, and they may then try to return back to what they were doing before. And so it's going to be probably quite challenging for people like you to figure out how to value businesses that have been going through this up and down swing as they're coming forward, I guess.
But it's a positive, right? I mean, certainly have been in corporate finance for many years. The companies that I really like to finance were the ones that had shown resiliency during a difficult period. Right? Two companies can look identically wonderful on paper, but when some adversity comes along, some will fold like a deck of cards, and the ones that roll up their sleeves and figure it out and get through, that's the company that you want to stop. And that's the company that, in fact, I think becomes more valuable. That's shown that capacity. Yeah,
that's awesome, and I totally agree. Listen, so what are you hearing from sellers right now? What's the word on the street? Is there a lot of panic? Is there fear? Is there hope? Is there some self-confidence?
Yeah.
What kind of stories are you hearing?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I'd say it falls into three categories. There are some that were thinking of selling and are absolutely not thinking of selling right now. They've got fires, they've got serious issues in their business that they have to deal with. They're not selling, and it may not even be saleable at this point in time. So that's a subset of the folks we're talking to. There are others that are stable. They may be doing okay. They've taken a hit, but they're not at risk of going out of business in this environment. But they're thinking, damn, I missed the window. I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves and do this for another 4 or 5 years, and then hit the next updraft before I exit. And then there's a growing category that were 60 plus years old in 08, 09 at the last recession. They took a hit then. They did the hard work. They ground their way out. And now they're like, oh my gosh, I've been hit again. And they're saying, I don't think I have the gas in the tank or the desire to go through this one more time. I just want out. And I recognize I'm going to take a value hit, but I want out. And so we're seeing more people, because those folks are 70 plus now. Yeah. So you can understand, continuing to grind for another 5 years to get back to peak value might not be in the cards for them. So we've been talking about this. We're working at developing a fast track go-to-market process for folks like that who are clear that maximizing value and everything that goes in is not their top criteria anymore. It's just, I want out. I want to make sure my staff is well looked after. I want this company in the hands of somebody that's going to continue to take it forward and developing methodology to achieve.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I know you've got some really interesting methodology around how to about making something like that happen. In fact, we've been talking because we're looking for ways that maybe we can help you and to fast track clients to get them at least in a better position to be able to sell, to clean things up and get that business sort of shine it up and polish it up and get it ready in a position to be more sellable. So that's cool. I mean, some of the most important things from our perspective in terms of increasing value for a company is extracting, the work that we do is extracting a business owner from a company, making that business function independently from the owner. Is that a kind of thing that as valuations fall, is that still going to have a positive impact on value as we go forward?
Having a well-run business that's firing all cylinders and well-structured and has all the things in place that you espouse for your clients is always going to add value. I mean, it's a relative function, right? Those are the companies that are more likely to survive in this environment. Those are the companies that are more likely to prosper when the economy starts to improve. All the stimulus kicks in. Maybe some of the competitors have fallen by the wayside. So having all that discipline and structure in place that Bordell puts in place for their clients, that is definitely going to be something that's going to be positive for those companies and their value going forward.
And then I appreciate you saying so. And from your perspective, what are some of the things that business owners should be doing to get ready? I mean, if they are thinking, and a lot are, as you mentioned, there's a big chunk of the demographic out there that is going to seriously look at selling in the next few years, and maybe sooner than later. So what are some of the things that you're telling people they need to do right now to try to put themselves in a position as they come through this to be able to get ready to sell down the road?
Yeah, I'd say for some that are fortunate enough to be in the right industries, those defensive industries, again, selling now is still an option. So they're not kind of shut out of this. For those that just want out and are willing to give up some value, then selling now is still a scenario they can pursue. For the vast majority, they're going to have to do some work, and it really comes down to the way companies are valued. The vast majority of companies are valued based on the free cash flow that the buyer is going to expect in the future from that business. And what buyers want to see from a cash flow profile is cash flow that is predictable, not volatile, and ideally growing at a healthy clip. And so whatever you can do within the confines of your operations to create that cash flow profile is going to make your company more valuable. And so I think this downturn is exposing weaknesses in a lot of businesses that maybe aren't as disciplined as what you espouse for your clients. Things like if you've got client concentration, you've got one client or three clients, and one of them happens to be bankrupt now or really suffering in this environment, that's passed on to you immediately. If you've done a good job to really diversify your client base, you're not going to feel that pain to the same degree, and your cash flow is going to be considerably more stable than more concentrated. Same thing on the supply side. If you haven't done the work to have a very well diversified supply chain and you're experiencing significant supply issues right now, your cash flow is extremely volatile, and again, you're less valuable. So the companies that have a little more rigor about the way they structure their business and the processes, that work in advance is going to make you more attractive.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think companies that are even struggling financially, as long as they get themselves in a positive or at least a stable cash flow position, now is probably a great time to work on that stuff, right? Obviously, you're trying to grow your business and increase your sales, but hopefully if you can be stable and if we got a V-shaped recovery, then now would be a great time to really work hard, I think, on that stuff. Put the extra time into that. So you come out of this in a stronger, at least with a stronger, healthier base on which to build the company. Yeah,
I mean, and of course, you're more expert than that than I. And the other leg of this is the financial structuring side of things. We're in a very cheap debt environment, and a lot of companies have leveraged aggressively and have kind of been flying by the seat of their pants on the razor's edge from a cash flow coverage perspective.
I want to ask you about that. Yeah,
I think the lesson that's going to come from that is maybe we need to be a little bit more conservative in our capital structures. Make sure that you're keeping a buffer in place. So that when these sort of significant events come around, you're not on life support immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I know you have a big resume in mezzanine financing as well prior to your work in M&A. So, like, what's going on in the banking world? A lot of these deals, you taught me this stuff. A lot of these deals, I call them like layers of a cake. There's different layers that go into the financing of a deal to get a deal done. But the bank is always almost always 9 times out of 10, I guess, a major part of that. So what's happening? What are the banks doing, and what's your perception?
Yeah, we've been talking to a lot of bankers because the bankers are funding the folks that are buying the transactions that we're selling and or funding the buyers that we're working with. So the availability of capital is the lifeblood of the M&A market. So we're out there trying to get a good read. What we're seeing is they're extraordinarily busy with all the principal deferrals. Making sure that those are being put through. They're working aggressively with the government to nail down the final terms on any government-backed lending programs, which I don't think are quite there yet, but they're poised and ready to deploy that in partnership with BDC and EDC. Beyond that, I think you'll see full support for government programs. Beyond that, I think you always have to remember that the banks are private enterprises that are there to generate profit and maximize value for shareholders. So to expect them to be spraying loans around in a very risky environment is, I think, unrealistic. So you're going to start to see capital availability pull back if it's not government guaranteed. They'll probably be focused more on their existing clients. Getting new money for a new client is going to be considerably more difficult, if not impossible, over the near term. If you're an industry that's particularly ground zero for this COVID, you're probably no-fly zone for a period of months, maybe even a year or more. So like restaurants and that kind of thing, it's going to be very difficult to raise capital for certain industries. So yeah, it's going to be a challenging time from a financing perspective. Large corporates and private equity groups probably okay from a capital raising perspective still. So the folks that are buying those larger companies will still have gas in the tank, so to speak. And then we're going to see a wave of insolvencies. Like all the banks are ramping up their special loans groups, unfortunately, to be ready for what is likely the next leg of this.
Yeah, well, so let's switch to maybe a more positive side of the conversation for a second then. I'm thinking back in 2008, when we went through obviously the recession. The clients that we had that had really healthy balance sheets, we tried to make sure that our clients had good, healthy balance sheets. And those were the ones that seemed to be able to survive, obviously. And in fact, not just survive, but a lot of them thrived because they had good, strong structure, they had good, healthy balance sheets. And then I used to say, back in the day, I was saying everything's on sale. I mean, I don't want to be so crass about it. We're in a really tough time. There's a lot of motion around what's happening in the marketplace right now. And we really care deeply about what people are going through. But there are businesses that are doing well. That is a reality. There are businesses that are in a position, could be luck, but they're in a position where things are going well for them right now. And so they're looking, maybe some of them, at what do I do about that? And maybe are there opportunities? Should I be trying to grow? If there are people that have been laid off, maybe some of those people I want to pick up. And if there's businesses that are struggling, they're closing their doors, maybe I'm in a position to find a way to connect them into our business in a different way that helps us to expand, and it turns it into some kind of a win-win. So I'm wondering, are you talking at all to buyers right now? Are people having those kind of discussions with you on the other side of the equation?
Yeah, you're not alone in that thought process. I'd say we've had more buyers and buyer groups reach out to us in the last couple of weeks and in the last couple of years. So there are a number of people that are thinking that way. So they're just introducing themselves or reaffirming that they're in the market and they're keen to move forward on an acquisition. I think the thought pattern is, it's been a seller's market for sure the last few years, and it's been very difficult as a buyer. And I think the buyers are perceiving that has probably switched into a buyer's market overnight, and they want to capitalize on that opportunity. In terms of timing, I mean, statistically, it's proven that any sort of investment or acquisition you do immediately after a downturn like we're experiencing now, the expected return, the return you experience is on average considerably higher than anything you would do in a more buoyant, robust market period.
Right.
So it is a good time to be considering deploying capital. The caveat there, and especially in this world, is you don't want to be catching a falling knife as a buyer, right? There are some companies that are not going to make it, and you want to make sure you're not the one buying one of those businesses. So buyers are going to have to be very thorough in diligence, because there are a range of more risk factors that you didn't really have to look too deeply into prior to COVID. How healthy are the clients? I mean, are the clients going to go under? Like, how stable is the revenue that you're buying? What does the supply chain look like? Can they deliver? Are the suppliers going to go bankrupt? So you have to look behind the veneer. What's the banking relationship like? If you need more capital for that business to grow it the way you're hoping to, are the bankers going to be there to support that? So as a buyer, you have to run a lot of scenario analysis to say, good, bad, and indifferent. What does this acquisition look like, and how are we going to value it? And then the other leg to that is you're going to want to structure these deals to share the risk appropriately. So not overpaying for a transaction, so recognizing there's more risk out there, so the valuation should reflect that. And then you're going to want to back-end load less cash up front, more on the earn-out side, or some sort of trailing consideration that is adjustable based on how the company actually fares. So I think it will be, over the near term, a good time for buyers. How long that lasts is a function, again, of how quickly we snap back out of this. There's a lot of stimulus out there. It could be a short window. We call it a glass business. When you can see, imagine you could see through a business. So if a buyer is looking at a business, if the business is properly structured,
this is something to consider as well. That's even if you're in a difficult position, and we're talking about buyers, but if you're on the other side and you're a seller, and you're looking to be acquired, and maybe things aren't doing that well for you, at least if your business is what I call glass, if the buyer can see through it and they can understand, and they have some trust about how the money is being generated or spent or what things are happening inside that company, it makes the due diligence a much more easier, smoother process to go through it.
It'll make it a quicker process, and it'll make buyers more comfortable in moving forward with your business if you can provide the information in a transparent manner and quickly and accurate information at the same time. And we were talking about financing and banking earlier as well. Yeah. Same message applies to your banker in this environment. You want to be actively communicating with your lender throughout this, good, bad, or indifference, no matter what's going on with your business. Human nature is to maybe turtle a little bit and not want to talk about things, especially if things aren't going so well. That's the wrong approach to take with your lender. They are oftentimes your most significant supplier or partner in your business. Supply them with the information, but also supply them with detail of how you're dealing with that situation. And you're going to be in a much better position than if you just kind of black box them. The most scary thing from a lender's perspective is the black box. So you got to make sure that you're communicating actively with both buyers and your lenders.
So based on what you're saying, I have a feeling that we may. I like your thoughts on this, but I have a feeling that we may see an increase in the speed with which companies want to sell. If we have people that are getting older, demographic that's getting older, we have buyers that are looking for deals. We have older people that are maybe saying, you know what, I just want to sell. I'm not willing to go for another 10 years to try to build this thing up. We may see less valuations lower in the marketplace, but my gut tells me that we're going to see potentially a lot more transactions, which of course has ramifications for everybody on both sides to think about it. Like your thoughts on that. What do you think is coming down the pipe?
I would agree. It's a small data set, but that's certainly what we're getting feedback from people directly and indirectly through peer mentoring groups and otherwise, is that they've got there's a bunch of entrepreneurs in the category that they're done, they're tired, they want out, and value is not the number one consideration as it was for the last few years. It's finding a good buyer that's going to look after the business, and I'm willing to give up on some value in order to be done with it right now.
Yeah, I'm just imagining that if there's higher volume and I'm a seller, obviously that's increased competition, and increased competition means I've got to deal with that issue in some way.
Well, that's been looming its head for a while. Like, that's one of the things we've been talking to people
about
the past several years. You don't want to be last out the door when everybody's selling, because that's not going to be good for the supply-demand imbalance. So there are more people that want to kind of trample to the exits in a faster fashion. That's going to be offset by the buyers who are going to want to be doing more diligence. So it'll be a little bit of a dance over the near term. And what is likely to happen, and what's happened in previous downturns, is you'll get some transactions, but volume will drop off, and then there's going to be an impasse between buyers and sellers, because human nature is such that the sellers don't want to recognize that values have changed. The buyers immediately want to assume that values have dropped. And so there'll be nothing going on for a period of time, and then gradually reality will be proven to be somewhere in between those two extremes.
Yeah. Well, we live in interesting times. Anyway, I wish for better times, but we'll
remember this. Yeah,
we will remember this. And it's out of almost every recession, and I know we're heading into one. It's pretty much a certainty. Out of every recession, some amazing things have happened. It's hard to step back and look at it, I think, from the big picture when you're in the middle of it, especially if you're the one that's getting whacked over the head with a baseball bat, so to speak. But there are amazing things that come out of these things, and businesses that emerge in ways. I mean, look at Zoom. Amazing, like just businesses that will come out of this that just will soar and explode. So we're going to see a brave new world. We may not know exactly what it looks like or what it's going to look like, but boy, we're going to see a brave new world. That's for sure, I think. So we do have a couple questions, I think, and we can answer before we wrap things up. And if we can get something put on the screen, there we go. what's the easiest way of increasing value in a business? The easiest way of increasing value in a business.
The silver bullet. Geez, I've never told anybody this answer. Okay. Yes. I think there's probably no easy way. I mean, value simplistically for most later stage businesses is a function of a multiple and a function of the EBITDA that the business is generating. So moving either of those metrics is the key to growing your value. From a multiples perspective, there's certain business activities that are more valuable than others. So if you're like a service business, there's a certain range of valuation multiples for that type of business. If you can move it into more of a product or even a software type of activity to complement what you're doing, those are much higher multiple businesses. So that's one way of ramping up your multiple. We talked about making your cash flows more predictable through all the operational work that you would do with your clients, Mark. That's a way to grow the multiple. And then from an EBITDA perspective, simply growing that EBITDA, which is going to be incredibly challenging in this environment for most companies, is the other way to move that value metric.
Right. So from our perspective, really just what you're saying, I guess, is that if we have predictable growing cash flow of businesses, and then that's not dependent on the owner. In other words, if the closer the business becomes to becoming sounds crass to say, but becoming a money machine, the higher the value of that business, right? I mean, it's a crass way of saying it, but I think it's an accurate way of describing it. So from our perspective, the operational side, we try to take businesses and help the owner be extracted in a way, to have the business no longer rely on its daily operations on that owner. And so we do things like improve the staff and bring in new people and put clarity of job descriptions and systems and processes and KPIs and metrics for measuring progress, and all the corporate structure think about the corporate structure you see when you go into a large company and apply that structure to a small business, and you'll end up automatically having some kind of positive impact on the value of that company no matter what, because the business is now separate from the owner and producing cash on its own. It's complex, but it's also straightforward at the same time. There's an A, B, C, D, E kind of formula for going through that. So hope that helps.
Yeah, maybe another way to answer that is just looking at the multiple. If you think of conceptually what the multiple is a reflection of the level of risk that a buyer sees in your future cash flows materializing on time and in the amounts that they're expecting. And so if someone says, I'm going to pay you a 4 multiple for your business, if you flip that on its head, 1/4, 25%, they're saying I need a 25% rate of return for the risk that I perceive in putting my money into buying your company. So if you can reduce that perceived risk, all the things that you do, right? You're not dependent on the owner. You don't have client concentration. You don't have supplier concentration. All your processes are documented so that things are done reliably and consistently. The likelihood of that cash flow materializing on time and in the amounts that they're expecting is far higher. Now I'm willing to pay you a 10 multiple because I only perceive a 10% risk of those cash flows not developing as per expectation.
Absolutely. All right, that's fantastic. I think there's another question here. How will the coronavirus impact buying multiples of EBITDA? Yes, you answered that a little bit already, but maybe you want to expand on that.
Again, the valuation is all about the cash flow the company is generating, and so and the certainty of those cash flows and the expected timing of those cash flows. So over the near term, that's a very murky picture, and there are very few people that can point clearly that they're going to be able to deliver cash flow in the amount in line or even better than historic and on a time frame that they can be certain about. And so that murkiness is going to reduce multiples over the near term. How quickly that snaps back will again be a function of the recovery. Like, what does that recovery shape look like? If it's a quick recovery, it'll snap back quickly. And if we're down in the muck for months and years, then that's going to be the new normal, and the expectation of future cash flows is going to be less than what the company was generating historically, and so the multiple will come off.
Yeah, right, for sure. I think we have one more here.
Will definitely blow out over the near term. It'll be quite a bit longer. Because I think over the near term, you can clearly say it's not going to be a seller's market, so the buyers will have a bit of an upper hand from a negotiating perspective. There's going to be no incentive for them to rush through a transaction because they're going to want to just see how the market is developing over time to make sure that they're not catching that proverbial falling knife. And they're going to want to do more diligence, as I touched on, and rightly so. They're going to want to look under every rock and make sure that all potential risk factors have been identified and, as best they can, structured around. So, a typical deal start to finish is 6 to 9 months for a sell-side engagement from when you first meet the client. I think we're probably going to add another month or two to that process because diligence is generally going to take longer, and it might take a little longer for buyers to close on an LOI.
Good. Well, hey, Axel, this has been really, really interesting. I really appreciate you taking your time to come out. Totally fantastic. And I look forward to, I guess, virtual handshake. I look forward to getting together with you one of these days soon when we're all allowed.
Yes, for real at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, I really appreciate you having me out, and I hope everybody stays safe. And if there are any follow-on questions, always available to have a chat.
For sure. All right. Thanks, man. Take care. And thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.